truth is always true, whether you believe it or not. And so we're all catching up to who we really are. But for whatever reason, and I will say it was a God moment, I was able to drop into that self-compassion, and that was my opening to get better.
Wow. Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Molthan, and I am the host of the Into the Rock show. If this is your first time to watch this show, what do we talk about? It's real simple. We share inspirational stories from inspirational people. And today we've got a good one. Sex, drugs, rock and roll. Former Playboy model turned professor and had her own TED Talk. And we're going to have that TED Talk at the end of this show. Jo Weatherford. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this incredible show with my guest, Jo Weatherford. But make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can catch all the shows here at Into the Rock. Enjoy. Welcome to the show, and what a great opening, and what an incredible woman you are. And I'm really excited about this, and I'm really excited about you sharing your story. And we love having women like yourself on the show here at Into the Rock to help other women, women who are searching for that new way of life and hope. I mean, from Playboy bunny, Playboy model to professor, Jo Weatherford is an addiction expert and a TEDx speaker, which we saw some clips of just earlier. And I got to watch your TEDx speech, powerful. And but it wasn't always easy, Jo. I mean, it wasn't always easy. And welcome to the show, and tell us a little bit about what it was like.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And I will say it's still not always easy, but it's always worth it. And it's so much better now that I don't have to have this crippling addiction become the thing that is now the problem that I'm trying to escape from. I mean, it's just like, why do you drink? Because I'm sad. Well, why are you sad? Because of what I did when I was drinking. And it's just this endless vortex that you can't get out of. So now life still lifes, but I've learned the tools to deal with it differently, and it's so much better.
It is. What a great life today. But, there's a template that I kind of go by of, what it was like, which is a very small part of our story. Okay. What happened, the awakening, and what it's like today. If you don't mind, just who was Jo Weatherford growing up, and what led to the decisions that we, not just you, but we, because I can relate, made to get us to where we're at today, where we're now a vision of hope.
Well, growing up, I always felt different. And this is such a common story with so many of us that find ourselves in the throes of addiction. I never had that sense of belonging. I felt very unwelcomed. I felt like I landed on this foreign planet that I had no business being in, and I had zero support to help me try to figure out what the hell to do with it. I found a diary that I kept when I was 4. So, I mean, I was definitely that weird little emo kid, just from the get-go, trying to figure out all of these feelings and not really having an outlet. And a lot of my childhood was beautiful, but a lot of it was cloaked in addiction. Both my parents had problems with drinking. My mom's got really bad when I was around 7. I can remember the day I went to pick up her what I thought was orange juice before going to school. And I took a swig of it. And of course it was straight vodka, with like a splash of orange juice. And at that moment, I didn't really understand what was going on, but I knew my life was going to change significantly. It was just that reckoning in that moment of like, oh shit, this is a problem.
Yeah.
And it was, and it continued to be. And, if you can't beat them, join them. So many people with a parent that has addiction issues will go one extreme or the other. They'll never touch it, or they'll become like me at age 12, just full blown alcoholic. I mean, at age 12, just to zoom into that moment in time, I was dating a 19-year-old. So, just like all the behaviors, I did all the things.
Yeah.
And shocker, he cheated on me. And I just remember the pain that I felt was so crippling. I did what I would always seen everybody else do. I went up to the liquor cabinet. I made the worst jungle juice you could possibly imagine, just threw everything in this bottle, and I slammed it. And I'll tell you, I was like, oh shit, I'm home. Like it just instantaneously felt like the exhale that I've never been able to accomplish. It was this, and it worked. And that's the sad thing with addiction, is there's that point of diminishing returns, right? Where it does work, and then it hits this point where then it also becomes the thing, which is the trauma, which you need the escape from. But that first drink for me, I was like, okay, I'm going to be okay. And so it's crazy because
Right.
as my addiction continued to get worse, it's almost what killed me. Had multiple suicide attempts, but it's also what kept me alive. Like if I didn't have that reprieve or way to check out, I wouldn't be here anymore. So I really look at it as kind of this both and. But from age 12, it was bad. It wasn't just my primary coping mechanism, is my only coping mechanism. I did it every
Yeah.
time I was upset, which of course is a hormonal 12-year-old with a lot of behavioral issues. That was a lot. I was constantly needing this way to check out. And I was always high functioning. I was a star athlete and I graduated second in my class a year early. I went to college on scholarships and I was actually going to be a broadcast journalist. That was what I wanted to do. I got a great job. I was co hosting a show on our local NBC affiliate, prime time slot, Sunday, 9 a.m. Like I had a bright future. And then I was also carrying so much darkness. So it was like really,
Yeah.
wearing these two hats and God, it was just awful. So what happened was I met a girl, she worked for Playboy. I got involved in that world and the money was good. At that point, my addiction was so bad, there's no way I could have gotten a real job. Like, I didn't know what day it was half the time. And so I could go in and shoot for a few hours, make stupid money. It was actually encouraged to be fucked up, it was perfect for me at
Yeah.
the time. It was 100% the best I could do. I would never do that now, but I wasn't connected to myself, to God, to truth. I had no sense of worth. And it's so ironic to me that here I was like shooting for magazines, but yet I hated myself so much. Like I've never felt
Yeah.
uglier than it when it was like, oh, I'm an FHM. It was just such this dichotomy of like, wow, I should feel so different. And to bring you to the point that I really broke the first time, painting the picture, I'm in Newport Beach in this beautiful condo. I'm dating one of the Chargers. So I got an NFL player boyfriend. I'm partying at the Playboy Mansion. I had just shot for FHM. My magazine was coming out. It was the first time I'd shot with my clothes on for a long time. So, like, my family could see it. I was proud of it. And I had tons of cash shoved under my mattress and I wanted to die. And it was not just like I
Yeah.
want to die, which I think is actually a more common experience than we like to acknowledge or admit. But it was deeper than that. It was like, and I'm actually going to do something about it. And I knew how unstable I was. And so I remember I called my mom and I said, I need to go to rehab. And I did. So the first time that was my lowest point, when on the surface, it looked like I had, this, what some people might deem an incredible life. And it was just absolute misery.
I can totally relate to that. And one thing that one of my passions is, and what I share when I speak is, we hear the word addiction, and what is addiction, and people automatically think of the drug addict and alcoholic. I did too. That's what I would go to, and that's the stigma. As a stigma, and that we're bad people, and growing up, and what I hear is, we're not bad people. We're just sick people trying to get well. I would get just a much of a rush, in the throes of my addiction, of being nice to people, picking up the tab when I didn't have money, helping people, because little did I know it was actually it felt good, but I wanted that love and that acceptance and that friendship. So when I say this, Joe, that if we really get the true definition of addiction, that it's a person, place, thing, or a thought that has become my source, that's addiction. And with that said, everyone is an addict. Everyone is an addict. Does that make sense to you? And for
Absolutely.
me, my personal experience was this witchcraft thing, this hocus pocus thing that I heard everybody said, that it's a spiritual awakening. It's your own spiritual awakening Describe that awakening for you, that it was over and that something new was going to happen.
It didn't happen that first time. I went to rehab and it was great because it kept me alive. It was like I pressed the pause button and it allowed me to reset everything enough. And I actually did stop using hard drugs, but I didn't stop drinking. And for me, drinking was always
Right.
really the thing. And it's so true because when I think about addiction, I think about something we use to start feeling something or to stop. And then we use it compulsively,
Yeah.
right? So there's this compulsion, and it's this God shaped hole we're trying to fill, and it's causing us negative consequences, and we can't stop, And for me, alcohol was always that. It was the remedy and it was the poison, and I just couldn't get away from it. My spiritual awakening actually came much later. So I was able to go to grad school, get a master's, I'm starting my professional life. My drinking, I was able to, I don't know, keep it under wraps as much as humanly possible. Like, it was still bad, but it wasn't good. And then I had an experience that shattered me, and I was raped. And as awful as that moment was, it was the first time in my life I felt compassion for myself. It was the very
Mm,
first time I felt this shouldn't have happened to me, and I felt sad that it happened to me.
mm,
And I'm always very careful when I talk about this because a lot of women will come up to me after speaking engagements. They hear my story and they're like, I've never felt that before. And so I want to just say, if you have been violated and you haven't felt that yet, you haven't felt it yet, because it is there. It is true. Truth is always true, whether you believe it or not. And so we're all
mm.
catching up to who we really are. But for whatever reason, and I will say it was a God moment, I was able to drop into that self compassion. And that was my opening to get better.
Wow. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. What is your message? And you're touching on a huge topic that we talk about a lot here on Into the Rock, and that's trauma. The trauma that it's not what was done to us, it's how it's affected us. How have you worked through your trauma in this situation?
It first and foremost, I had to stop drinking because whether you're drinking,
Yeah.
smoking weed once in a while, shopping, having risky sex, staying in that toxic relationship, whatever you're doing that is allowing you to ignore the work, ignore the truth, live a lie, you're band aiding yourself just enough to avoid it. We have to remove those things. And you've got to be willing, ready, and able to feel and drop in. And you want to do that with support. So, I've worked with a lot of phenomenal therapists. I swear to God, I've been in therapy for like 40 years, and I'm so grateful for it. So thankful for it. But I've had incredible people hold my hand and guide me through the process. Psychedelic therapy has been a huge part of my healing. I always talk about that with caution as well. I don't believe psychedelics are a wise choice for everyone. But for me, I was very called to them. I had been completely sober for 3 years. I was really called to ayahuasca, but I was also very afraid to take anything that I considered a drug. Anything that altered my
Right.
state of consciousness, I was there for, like, smart and very cautious. But I had a really profound opening with ayahuasca. It allowed me to tap in and process some things that I didn't even know were running my unconscious programming. It really dropped me below the surface, allowed me to do some deep shadow work. And so psilocybin microdosing has been a big part of my journey. And that has been one
So
of the
let me stop
most.
you a second. Let me interrupt you for a second. Let's tap the brakes here. This is a really good topic here. We've never talked about him to the rock. Walk me
Oh,
through, educate me. What is psychedelic therapy? What is it?
beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for that pause. Well, there's
Yeah.
lots of different ways that we can do this, but it is, when it's done appropriately, and I will say this over and over again, set and setting is everything. I am not encouraging you to go take 5 grams of mushrooms, sit in your living room, pop them, and see what happens. It is completely
Right.
different experience. I'll go with psilocybin therapy first. So you do this with a trained therapist, a professional. What happens when we take these different, whether it's MDMA or psilocybin, iboga, there's lots of different ways we can tap in. We go under the line into our unconscious. So, some of the issues with traditional therapy is we are regurgitating our small story because it's all that's available to us. And our unconscious programming is actually responsible for 95% of our life. So, what is happening under the line of consciousness, we can use psychedelics to get in there and tap in. So, we can remove those layers, we can drop into deeper healing that is being called for. Again, set and
Hmm.
setting is the absolute most important. My ayahuasca journey, that is a root. You drink a brew and it it opens you up to messages that you wouldn't otherwise have access to. And again, it's in a controlled setting. Psilocybin, very
And,
similar
and what is a
experience.
controlled setting? What's a controlled setting look like? I know what an uncontrolled setting looks like,
Yeah.
but what does a controlled setting look like?
Someone that can hold the space, can hold the energy, somebody that can tend to you if it gets too scary or too out of control. You know, one on one doing psilocybin therapy with a therapist. So usually you're with, headphones on, blindfolded. But then when you need to process what's coming up, you're literally doing a therapy session right there, sitting there with somebody who can witness your trauma compassionately, because that's how it doesn't become PTSD. We are wickedly resilient. We are meant to survive
Wow.
unbelievable atrocities. The problem with PTSD and trauma is when we don't have a compassionate witness to share our story. And then we get into meta emotions, how we feel about what we feel. And then we create dialogue and belief systems stemming from this trapped negative energy within us. So, psychedelic therapy is our way to go into that wound, but re imprint a new emotional experience with it of I am loved and I am safe. That's how we
Hmm.
integrate experiences. You know, a lot of exposure therapy and trauma work is like, oh, let's just make us to where we don't care about this thing anymore. And I call bullshit on that all day long. I want to
Yeah.
integrate those
Yeah.
experiences. I want to hold myself with love and reverence. I want to be in my power as I integrate everything and use it for my greatest evolution. But these medicines can help us do that. But that's what I mean, a controlled environment. Somebody is there helping you work through, whether it's energy work, talk therapy. There's so many different modalities, but you need someone that is there to be with you through that process.
Would you say that this is the solution, the cure, or is it just a different part of therapy to help get to the root of the problem?
You know, a lot of people, especially if there's any history of psychosis, this is not a good option for them. So I don't want to say it's the only
That makes
option because
sense.
it's not
That makes
available for
sense.
everyone. It also can be exceptionally shattering, and we need to be able to make sure that we have the time, energy, and resources to put ourselves back together. If we're going to have this like massive opening, right, there can be a restriction that comes, if you're like, oh, I'm a mom, I've got 4 kids, or I'm running 3 companies, or I'm on the go all the time, it may not be the right timing for you either. And that doesn't mean you can't start healing. So I don't believe it is the end all tool. And I really struggle when I hear people say, like, oh, I did ayahuasca once and now I'm in this enlightened master and I worked through all my shit. I'm like, oh, did you? I mean, good. I hope you did. But for me, it is a tool. And there are always deeper layers, like I never think
Yeah.
I'm finished. I'm like always, always in it. And I'm also mindful to not get addicted to healing because that's the other thing I see a lot. It's like, how about put down the self help book and go live your life too? Like we need to
Right.
enjoy
Right.
life as
Right.
well. So it's about balance.
Right. That's exactly right. And that's a really good point. We can get addicted to healing or recovery. I see people that get addicted to service work. They stay busy, busy, busy because they're scared to sit still and be alone with themselves. What about prayer and meditation in your life? How do you, is that a part of your life today?
Every day. Every day it is.
Yeah.
I do a lot of affirmative prayer, thanking the universe for giving me what it is that
Yeah.
I know deep down I am worthy of receiving. But I also, the meditation for me and the stillness is key. And I do mini meditations throughout the day. I mean, like before I jump on here, I'm going to drop in and I'm going to check how present am I. And, just really asking myself, where am I in this moment? Like there can be little cues little ways in which we drop back in. Because when we're in that automatic programming, we're just going through life. It's so easy to disassociate and go on autopilot. It's like, take 6 deep breaths and check in. You don't need to sit there with
Right.
crystals and 30 minutes. It's like we can do moving meditations throughout the day, but that for me has been spectacular. And I'll tell you, going along with plant medicine, iboga has been shown to be huge in addiction treatment. So I would encourage people
Hmm.
to look into that if that's something they're interested in. We don't have the time to really dive into it, but it's an African bark that was used in rite of passage ceremonies. And essentially, you take it, and it's like the most intense 12-step work you'll ever do. Everybody that has taken it has the same experience. The file cabinet of your life gets opened. You get a stern lecture talking to from, God, dad, whoever. It's just you look at all your behaviors. But for me, it was 24 hours on a mat in silence. And 2 days before I did
Wow.
that, I did a microdose of it, 8 hours completely still on a mat in silence. And that for me was just as powerful as any medicine journey I've ever done. I really went into the creeks and crevices of myself. And it's important. Take away the distractions, eliminate them all. That thing that you grabbed for, that thought that you have, like even I asked the guy that was facilitating, I'm like, can I journal? And he's like, no, it's just one more way you bullshit yourself. It's in the future, I'm going to do this thing. It distracts you from the moment. Just sit there. And I was like, ugh. And it was so challenging.
Wow. What's some of the pushback that you've received talking about this? Because let me tell you something right now, listening to this to you, I think it's great. But me being vulnerable and honest like I am, I get scared because that's something that I wouldn't want to do because I've never taken 2 Advil in my entire life. You know what I mean? I'm like, it scares me because I would do this and this eat this bark and then, then I would go eat the whole tree.
I think that
I
that
mean,
is beautiful. I honor it, and I think it's wise, and I
yeah,
certainly, you are called to this or you aren't, and there is no right or wrong,
yeah,
and it's everybody's
yeah,
individual journey. And I'm very clear on that. And I've been so fortunate that I have not received pushback on it. Even when I was still a professor at the university, I've been talking about very controversial subjects like this for over 10 years before it was popular, like everybody knows MDMA therapy now and all this stuff. But I believe that this work is protected by a higher consciousness. I just do, because I know the healing
yeah,
that can happen. And even, you don't need to do a full blown ceremony. Like, watch Fantastic Fungi. You can microdose psilocybin and have phenomenal neurogenesis, repair, and healing, heart opening experiences. And that medicine is below the threshold of you knowing you took something. So there's a lot of
I
options, but
got you.
I do believe this is a very precious gift. And we are so fortunate that Indigenous people have chosen to share this with us, because for thousands of years, this has been a very intricate part of healing and ceremonies. And so, to answer your question, knock on wood, I don't get pushback, but I also don't push it.
That's good.
I
There you
invite.
go. Yeah, yeah. Well, that's really good. So, Professor Joe Weatherford, professor, you were literally a professor.
I taught addiction courses at the university. So
Okay.
I taught focusing on addiction and trauma, and I also taught students that wanted to become therapists. And so I had the best job in the
Hmm.
world. We literally would get together and do therapy in class live with a group of individuals. And it's funny because it's not funny, but I hear a lot of people just, talk so poorly about this upcoming generation. And I got to tell you, I'm on fire for them. I love them. I think that they're rule breakers. I think that they're going to shake shit up. And I think they're really, really hungry for something new and different, which I believe, we kind of all are. And they're fearless enough to go and do it. So
Yeah,
I'm excited.
absolutely.
Yeah.
When Joe would and Joe, you're no different than anybody else like me, and but there are times, and I can speak for myself. Self sabotage, still creeps in. I look at the past, and especially I'm in the middle of writing this book and, looking at the past of my life. The cool thing is that anger and resentment hasn't crept back in, but there's been some guilt and shame. And I wish I would have, done this different and all of that. What do you do when you start catching yourself getting into self-sabotaging behavior?
Yeah, it's a beautiful question. Mine shows up most often in my romantic relationships. I am really trying to heal a lifetime of codependency and attachment issues. So mine will
Mm-hmm.
pop up when I'm activated and triggered by that romantic partner. And I'm currently single right now, which has been great because then
Mm-hmm.
I just get to just not pay attention to it. But I'll tell you, the last time I really spun out was November. So my relationship ended. I'm in court with my ex trying to get divorced. It got kicked back to the United States. So my court case got thrown out. And then I found out my mom, who's been sober for 13 years, relapsed. So that all hit on the
Oh
same day.
no.
And I snapped. And I will tell you, my nervous system went offline. It was a dysregulation that I had never felt. Like, I didn't even know it was possible to feel simultaneously like the worst depression I've ever felt and anxiety. Like, how can you hold the heaviness and the anxiousness all at once? It was the absolute worst, and it terrified me. And then of course I'm like, oh my
Right.
God, my mom went back after 13 years. I'm at 12. We're so enmeshed. Am I going to go out? Like, it scared the shit out of me. So I'll tell you what I did.
Yeah.
And I'm very fortunate. Like, I had the means and the ability and the time to do this. I don't have kids. I didn't have a partner. I went to my parents' place in the forest and I sat in a room and I was like, I'm not leaving until I'm better. I'm not going to do a
Hmm.
ceremony. I'm not reaching out to somebody. I'm not taking a trip. I have all these ways that I will pattern interrupt myself and like put a band aid on it. And I just didn't. I'm like, I'm going to sit here. And I'll tell you, it was awful. I lost 20 pounds. I stopped sleeping. I literally thought, oh my God, I'm going to check myself into an institution if this doesn't lift. And I did. I told God, I'm like,
Right.
you got 3 days left. Bring it. But then I got to do something because I'm not going to make it out of this. And I sat in a room and I just was with all of it. And it was so much my codependency. It was all the times I didn't feel loved. It was that little girl inside of me. And I went through age 3 and 5 and 7. And I went through the entire timeline of when I felt rejected and alone and unworthy of love. And I held myself through all of it. And that was the most warrior shit I've ever done. Even rehab was way easier than that because you're like, okay, I'm checked out. I'm in this treatment facility. They're telling me what to do. I mean, this was me and me. Like, that was it. And I just sat
Right.
in it and I didn't run and I wasn't afraid. And that's something I've learned in psychedelic therapy is when it gets scary, if you just allow, then it loses that that intensity. It's like what we resist
Yeah.
persists. So as I bumped up all these edges of unworthiness and shame and all of it, I just allowed it. The energy dissipated and then I could drop deeper into myself. And it was a process. But I will tell you, breathing is huge. Anyone can do it, it's free.
Yeah.
60 breaths, check in. How are you? Hands on your heart. How old am I right now? And we get dysregulated like that, we get yanked back into time. So just pause and ask yourself, how old am I right now? Oh, I'm
I
7.
like that.
Right? And then what do you need? Be the parent. Be the parent you didn't have. Because you know what I got? It was like, shut up. Your emotions are too much. Go figure it out, or whatever. We all have, our experience, but be the parent that goes, hey, I love you and I see you and I'm sorry. What do you need? Like, what is the core need in that moment? Compassion, love, security. Hey, I got you. Like, I am the wise woman. I am here. I've got you. Like, that's the work, really. And
Yeah.
then when you're not triggered, when life is easy, fill your cup, wake up, make your bed, start your day with a win right away. We need to start priming our
Right.
brain to look for what's right, look for the beauty. Gratitude list every morning without doubt. Our brains are wired for survival, not for happiness. We have to actively
Right.
override that shit all the time because you will
Right.
find what you are looking for, which is why you've got to check in. What are my negative beliefs about myself? Because your ego is going to help you magnetize to situations and people and opportunities that reinforce your beliefs, because the ego just wants to be right. So if you're like, I'm a piece of
That's
shit, then
right.
it's like, see, you're right. So it's like we have to
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
so diligent and be in control as much as we can, because we cannot control anything outside of us, but we can have our boundaries, we can have our practices, we can have our self love, and we can have our dignity. And that's how we actively choose, like, okay, how am I going to take care of myself today? And it has to be the most important thing. Put the oxygen mask on
Yeah.
yourself first.
I love it because, my fiance and I, Lee, she's always reminding me to breathe, because my whole life I held my breath. And, we were, I work with Dr. Rob Kelly, and incredible trauma therapist. And, it's these breathing exercises. And in the morning, the first thing that we do is take these deep breaths to give our conscious brain the oxygen that it needs to bury the subconscious, brain. And so I have just recently been doing that really focused on my breathing the last, 8 or 9 months, and it helps, and I catch myself during the show, you talking and thing. I mean, I can relate to it, and I hold my breath and,
Yes.
just to breathe and get into the now. Another thing that helps me when you're talking about it, when we're grieving, getting into service work, not service work as far as it's all good, handing out meals, but simply the simple action of maybe just texting 3 people saying, hey, just thinking about you, hope you have a great day. Just doing some sort of action just to get out of self. Because when I'm left alone in my head, it's a bad playground and someone's going to get shot, and, and just that action of getting out of self. And that's beautiful how you shared that. What's Joe Weatherford, Professor Joe Weatherford? What are you doing today? What do you do to as an addiction expert, and what do you do?
Well, so 3 years ago, I feel like everybody has a COVID story. Mine was my ex husband and I decided to sell everything. We had a martial arts school, sold it. I quit the university and we moved to Cabo. So I was like, let's just move to Mexico, go live on the beach. And that was my plan. I was just going to be retired, living on the beach, and then life lifed. And a year into it, I find myself in another country going through a divorce, and I didn't know what I was going to do, but I of course have always had a passion for helping people move through addiction,
Yeah,
and especially people who love people who are addicted. That is actually a
yeah,
huge part of the work that I do. I work with a lot of CEOs. I do a lot of intimacy work with men. They're high performers. They absolutely slay it in business, and we got to
yeah,
work on opening their hearts, their intimacy, helping them really improve their marriages is a lot of the work that I do. So I do work with addiction and trauma work and also intimacy, because I love love. And then when I think about the opposite of addiction, it's love, and so it's so great
yeah,
that I get to work in those two worlds. But yeah, so I work with clients online. I do a lot of speaking. I do a lot of intensives. Couples will bring me out and I get to just kind of observe for like 3 to 5 days. And it's cool because you see all the patterns, the defense mechanisms, how people close off. And then we get to do some sessions where it's like real work. And it starts with dropping into your heart. You talked about like when you were breathing now and it's shallow. So much of us speak from the neck up. It's like we need to drop
yeah,
way lower, and you think about
yeah,
having a really intense conversation with your partner, especially about like conflict or something that's not going to be a fun conversation. If you aren't really dropped into your heart, coming from a place of, I love you, I choose you, you're my partner, and I want to work on this as your teammate. So from that place,
right,
let's discuss these issues. You're screwed, because everybody's
yeah,
defenses go up. We're way too caught in that blame and defend. Women will just keep going over the problem and the guys are just like trying to fix it and it's just defend themselves. It's just a nightmare. So I really
right.
enjoy that work as well.
I bet you're good at that. Is it safe to say that you're good at it because you recognize the behaviors? Because we've done them too, or we
Yes.
that was we're seeing ourselves live on stage. I've been down this road, and let me provide some solutions for you. And another thing is with Lee and I, what's really cool, and I'm glad you brought this up. I want to share this, and hopefully it helps someone. Is that Lee and I are we have recognized that when we trigger each other, okay, we understand it's from past trauma, and we also understand it's an opportunity to become closer.
Absolutely. And it's those
Yeah,
moments to just say, wow, that really hurt my feelings, and then we come
yeah,
together as a team to go, let's explore this instead of like, God, you're so sensitive or whatever, it is a
yeah.
beautiful, and I love that you use that word of opportunity because that's what it is. And when we come to our partners in vulnerability and truth with the idea of it's going to be repaired and this is not your fault, it's like, oh my God, it's amazing. It's everything we've always wanted. Like, hey, I haven't heard from you. I'm not feeling very important. What's going on? Instead of like, you didn't call me, click, whatever, cut off. It's just, we're so quick to do that. And again, I get it, but it's like when we're really in our power and when we have somebody that is willing to do the work with us, there is nothing more beautiful than that. It is so incredible when two people come together and are like, I got you.
Right. I call it being in harmony. You're in
Yes.
rhythm together, and it is beautiful. And you're just carving through the snow. It's very peaceful. And then sometimes you hit a bump, and then you become close. Then you get back together. You're closer together. I want to wrap
Thank
up the show
God.
with this. What's that?
Well, I'm just saying, thank God we hit bumps. If it was just like always in flow, that'd be kind of boring. It's like a video game where there's no bad guy. A video game where you never
Right.
die, you just pass every level. I mean, none of us would play it. That would be so boring.
Right. Right. That is so funny. You're exactly right. Um, Joe, for the ladies and the women and young women, any woman out there, and I'm directing this towards women who are in the middle of a very traumatic situation, that they can relate to you. Doesn't whatever the category is, what is your advice or suggestion to them to take that risk to reach out? What is something that worked for you to provide some hope for them?
Oh, such a beautiful question. For me, the way it always worked though, I was so stubborn and I was so terrified, of the work. It always it got so bad I didn't have a choice anymore. So I just encourage you, bring the bottom up. You don't have to let it get that bad. And there is nothing within you that you will discover that you cannot handle because I also believe this. Nothing comes out that we are not ready to heal. So it's like if you just know it's
Mm,
all happening in perfect timing, just trust the process and find somebody that really can meet you. Be diligent. Like, don't just work with anybody. Find somebody who speaks your language. Find somebody who's walked that path before you, who knows the way. Find somebody who will empower you to pave your own path because that is really what we're here to do. Is like, I'm going to help just illuminate what's possible, but we all are our own best healers. So it's like you just have somebody that
mm,
supports while you do the work. And that is so hard when you don't trust yourself, when you've lost trust in yourself. But just know that you are so innately worthy of love and that there is a version of you in the future that knows you can do this. Tap into her because
yeah.
she's got you. That version of you has you and she's available to you. So it's like, be courageous. Right now, more than ever, we are being called to rise. Like, it's time and let's go.
Beautiful. Joe Weatherford, it has been an honor to have you on the show. You, like I led off the show, you're a powerful woman. It just exudes, and I'm glad that we connected and being on the show. We want you to come back on the show in the future and talk about different topics. Let's dive deeper into these topics that are not discussed that much, and topics that that men ask and say, "Hey, I just got just the person to bring on the show to answer these questions. And we would love to have you back on. For people who are listening that aren't watching this, how can they contact you and follow you?
So it's Joe Weatherford on Instagram and Facebook. I'm really active on there. And then I have my website is either recoveryremix.com or joeweatherford.com. It will take you to the same site. But please, if you have any questions, want resources, want to work with me, or want referrals somewhere else at different price points or male, female, like please just hit me up with anything. I'm here to support any way I can. And thank you so much for having me. This has been awesome.
Absolutely. And we'll have everything in the description where y'all can click on it. And once again, subscribe, share this out, and go follow Joe Weatherford, incredible woman, addiction expert, professor, TEDx speaker, mindset coach, who gets the heart of addiction, as you have just heard and seen. From all of us here at M2 The Rock, just remember this. I got 3 words, and it's got 8 letters and 1 meaning. That's 3 words, 8 letters, 1 meaning, and that is I love you. But most importantly, go make it a great day.
So I could tell you a million different stories, or I could tell you the same story a million different ways. I could tell you about the night my boyfriend stood me up for Pamela Anderson, or about the time my girlfriends and I were so wasted one night leaving a nightclub that we stole a street sweeper. And depending on my mood, the audience, and my intention behind telling you this story, I can tell it funny, sad, shameful, even proud. And while the details may vary from story to story, for a long time my opener was always the same. Remember that one time we were wasted? See, I was a raging alcoholic, and thankfully most of it I don't remember. What I do know is this. For me, the key to recovery always comes down to the stories that we tell, and whether or not we choose to focus on the negative or the positive, because it's never what happens to us and always the meaning we attribute to it. So take, for example, if somebody were to tell you that they're getting divorced, is it your instinct to say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry? Or wow, you must be so relieved, right? It's this same event, but a different story. So for me, a long time, the story I told around my addiction was dark and messy and suffocating. And it's true, it caused me and everyone around me an intense amount of pain. Back then, I didn't know that what we resist persists. And so the more I fought against the pain I was in, the more of it I experienced. I was kind of like that cat, like the cute, cuddly one that was just purring and happy all the time. But if that same cat were to get injured and you went to pick it up, it would bite and claw and hiss. I mean, I was a perfect example that hurt people hurt people. So not only did I have to feel bad about the pain I was causing myself, but also the pain I was causing everyone around me when I would disappear for days and not call. Even now, as I reveal this piece of myself, I can't help but be reminded of the shame I used to feel every second of every day. It's like, why do you drink? Because I'm sad. Why are you sad? Because of what I did when I was drinking, and just around and around it went. I didn't know back then either that there's a major difference between shame and guilt. That guilt says what I did was bad, and shame says I am bad. I felt like I couldn't move past my sins, so I just became them. And speaking of sin, it's interesting, I found out years later that sin is nothing more than an old archery term that means to miss the mark. So the way I look at guilt now is actually really positive. It's just an internal cue that lets me know the way I'm acting is out of alignment with my true self. That's literally all that it is. It's like, this is who I want to be, this is who I am, right? And it's that space in between that we call depression or anxiety. But instead of changing my behavior to bridge that gap, I just lowered my standards and expectations so I didn't have to feel so bad about myself. Pretty common coping mechanism. It's not just me, a lot of us do it. For example, if you went out Friday night and you did something you really, really felt bad about, you're actually way more likely to do it again the following weekend because we like to normalize our own behavior. It was just amazing, the pain that I just kept on perpetuating. It's wonderful to be able to look at my experience differently. So some of you have a personal story around addiction. And for those of you that are sitting there thinking, you know, none of this applies to me, like I would never do drugs. You have to remember, it's not just substances that we get addicted to, but also behaviors. Shopping, screwing, eating, working, whatever it is. Because addiction is really anything we do or use compulsively to make ourselves feel better that has negative consequences. Right? That's all it is. To keep it simple, we use for one of two reasons. So to either start feeling something or to stop feeling something. So it can be as simple as I'm going to go get a cocktail after work, right? So I want to start feeling more relaxed, or I want to stop feeling anxiety. But sometimes it's so much more. When we don't come from an environment that supports natural feelings of love and connection, we can use substances to manufacture those experiences. And just like somebody might take morphine to help with the pain of a broken leg, somebody else can drink to numb a broken heart. And if we look at brain scans of somebody in intense emotional pain next to somebody that's in intense physical pain, we're going to see the brain light up in the same areas because pain is pain. The only difference is we don't judge the person taking morphine. We judge the person using heroin, even though it's essentially the same substance used for the exact same reason. And just like it isn't all about morals and values, it isn't all about genetics either. Thanks to Dr. Bruce Lipton's research, what we know now is this. It's the environment that determines whether or not that gene gets flipped on or off. So for example, if I had 3 different Petri dishes up here, and each one contained a genetically identical organism, but I put one in intense heat, one in open air, and one in extreme cold, those 3 identical organisms can become 3 totally different things. So it's not about the gene, it's about the environment. What that means is you can have somebody that has that addictive gene, but if they don't grow up with abuse and neglect or trauma and they have loving and attuned caregivers, it might never get activated. So it's the environment that really, really matters. I tried to change everything except for that because I didn't want to change what really needed to. I had so much fear about getting better because what would that look like? Who would I be? And most importantly, how would I feel if I lost it? To keep it simple, really, trifecta of addiction goes like this. You have somebody genetically predisposed, they have pain and trauma, and then they find something that works at taking away the pain. And if you take the time to really listen to their story, more often than not, your question will go from, how could you be using, to how could you not? Because when someone's in intense pain and they know taking a drink or a hit is going to make them feel better, it's almost impossible for them not to. It would be like trying to drown yourself. And it's not about the drug anyway. It's about the characteristics and the intention of the person using it. To look at it any other way is the equivalent of saying a deck of cards is responsible for somebody's compulsive gambling habit. We need to focus on the real issue. We villainize substances in this country. But like Dr. Gabor Mate has said, what we need to do is ask what's right with drugs. If we can help somebody identify what's positive about the substance use, we can help them find alternative ways of getting the same experience. Once again, shifting that focus onto the positive. We need to really, really focus on ourselves because the reality is we can take away the substance and that's not treatment. That's a Band-Aid on a compound fracture, right? We need to go down deep within ourselves to the places that we are most terrified to face because that's where healing becomes possible. And it's also the hardest way to get there. I mean, I had searched high and low for the right therapist, drug, relationship, and I only ended up high and alone, finally realizing that nothing outside of ourselves can save us. So it was through the process of healing that I rewrote my story. I let go, and I was carried. And I've really come to a place now where I understand that while addiction almost killed me, it simultaneously saved my life. Because if I hadn't had some way to check out in those darkest times, I'm not sure how long I would have chose to stuck around. So I had to let go. I had to let go of that pain, resentment, all of it. I really did. And just be here and feel all of it. So what story do you want to tell? How do you want to tell it? Maybe it's a total rewrite, and maybe it's just some changes to the tone. But what we have to remember is that we may not be able to control everything that happens to us, but we can always control the story we tell around it and choose to seek beauty even in the ugliest of situations.